Three, two, one, and we are live. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to another author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. Pardon me. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia. Many of you know me as the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill, and joining me today is an author making her official debut here on the channel. My guest today is a history major and author of Peacekeeper, and has always enjoyed writing short stories since she was little, and has expanded her skills throughout the years. Her novel, Peacekeeper, is her debut science fiction novel, and she loves dabbling in that genre. And when she's not writing, she enjoys spending time with her family and traveling. She hopes that her passion for writing will be passed down to her daughter, along with her love for science fiction. So, without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to today's guest, fellow history lover and science fiction author, Melinda Brown. Melinda, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Awesome, Melinda. So, before we dive into your book, Peacekeeper, which again, really excited you actually have that on a sweater. I think that is very, very cool.
Thank you.
Is there any? You're welcome. Is there anything else you'd like to mention about yourself? Anything that wasn't covered in the bio?
No, I'm always, like I said, you narrowed it down. I'm a history major. I've always loved mythology, early European history. So yeah, and I've been writing since my teenage days. So yeah.
Nice. Now, I understand that Peacekeeper will be coming out very soon. So, as a little teaser for its upcoming release, what can you tell us about Peacekeeper?
It is a military sci-fi in the genre there. It goes around my female character, Krista Everett, who is a former Marine turned mercenary. And she's part of this group called the Peacekeepers that are contracted out to humanity's second attempt to colonize an exoplanet. And when they get there, they find out that things are not as what they seemed, and they've been kept in the dark a lot about stuff, and they have to deal with the alien race that's already there on the planet.
Ooh, I like that. And I already know another author of mine, another friend is going to love that story. That's exactly right in their genre. So let's talk about what led to this passion, Melinda. So in your bio, you've been writing stories for a very long time. But how exactly did this passion for the written word come about? Was it organically, or did someone ask you to write a short story just by a whim and you realized, hey, this is pretty good? And that's how it went from there?
Yeah, so actually it started out when I was in elementary school, where I had in fifth grade, where this teacher, she wanted us to write a short story, and she took the time to make a cassette tape back in the day of her review of each book, I mean each story. And she would make comments and suggestions, and she was very detailed. So it just gave me passion as that she cared about it. So I started to use writing as a way to, deal with certain events and life events, just like almost like therapy in a way,
Mm,
and just kind of built upon that throughout the years, really.
nice. Now, when would you say in your life, on your journey as an author, that you want to take your passion for writing and build upon it to make it into a potential career?
Well, I've been writing for a very long time, and I've always wanted to put myself out there, but I really didn't know what kind of book to write. Peacekeeper has been in my mind for years, but I really didn't know where to go with it. And so one day I was listening to this YouTube channel I listen to daily called Space Ambient Radio,
Hmm.
and it just started to click, and I just started brainstorming right away with the songs. So yeah.
Nice. That's actually pretty awesome, Melinda. And on the topic of Peacekeeper, let's talk about how that story came about. So, as you just mentioned, Peacekeeper has been with you for a very long time. But where specifically in your life, or when is probably the better word, did the story come about? Like, what were the inspirations that led to the creation of Peacekeeper?
Okay, yeah. So I this book dabbles a lot, almost with a little bit of like humanity's early history and religion and mythology. And so I put that into with this book. Also, people who know me, I'm a huge Mass Effect fan. So that really inspired this book too. And so I really want a strong female role. And I love military stuff. So I really wanted her to have that background. And so the pieces start coming together with it really.
Awesome. Now, when you began writing the initial draft for Peacekeeper, this is a two-part question.
Okay.
What were the goals you had going into this book, since it is your first novel? And what were the promises were you making to your prospective readers?
All right. So I started this book brainstorming in August of 2023. And my goal was I didn't want it to be just one book. I really wanted to expand upon it, build a world that I wanted to live in or stay in and continue to write stories with. And then for my readers, I know a lot of people get turned away from sci-fi because sometimes they find it a little bit dry or too much
Mm,
too much sci-fi jargon that kind of turns them away.
yes.
And so I really want to pull people back into the sci-fi genre and make characters that are personable, somebody they can attach to, and show that there's other sides to sci-fi that aren't as dry, and try to get more readers and potentially writers that way too.
Absolutely, 100%. Now, what would you consider the moment your family found out? Because again, you've been writing for a very long time, so they automatically knew you were a writer, that you love to write. But when did you tell them, or have you told them that you've been working on Peacekeeper? And if you have told them, what was the initial reaction like?
Yeah, so I've already told my family I've been working on Peacekeeper. They really don't know the level it's going to be at, so they really don't know right away. Well, except for my husband, that it's going to be published out there. So it's kind of when I actually have the physical copy, I'm like, here you go. They're gonna realize, hey, I was being serious, and this is coming out.
Awesome. Now, since it's your first book, are you doing any beta readers and ARC readers? And if so, from them, what has their response been like? Has it been very positive, very critical, or that sweet spot down the middle?
Well, the first manuscript, I had one beta reader, and I will say that the manuscript has changed drastically since the first draft. And so I will say also that the book was darker and more grittier than it is
Mm,
now. And so my beta reader loved it, but she said tone it down a notch. So there's a lot of stuff that I took out. um, I don't have any ARC readers, but the editor I had, who did the professional copy edit and develop editing, he actually did it twice for me. He actually gave me some great feedback and thoughts of about the book along the way. So he really liked, and he helped me like give me ideas about restructuring the book.
nice. And I think, that is very, very important, which we will touch on later in the interview, which is, of course, the real business side of being an author, because I definitely feel that is one aspect that tends to get overlooked. And I'll go more in detail about that. But before we get to that, so from the beta readers and from your family who read the initial draft of Peacekeepers, would you say that your promise to your future readers was validated? Well, maybe not validated, but it was met from your family and your beta readers. The expectations were met.
Yeah, so my editor who did give me some feedback as well, he said that he liked the humor I put in it, and he said a lot of times you don't see that a lot in sci-fi books, or it's forced. So he said there was a couple of scenes that made him chuckle. So I felt like that I really accomplished that goal to make something, to make a character that somebody could connect with or find attractive to keep reading about. And in regards to my beta, yeah, I told her that I took out the darker side and I toned down my character a notch, and she really liked the change I made my character to not make it such as a dark person.
Absolutely. Nice. And I think, as from what you've told me about Peacekeeper so far, it sounds like an incredible read, and you put a lot of passion and heart into it, which definitely leads into the next question, one of which I like to call several reflective questions in this interview. So the first one is, which I think is very important to talk about, is an imprint on one's work. And what I mean by that is, as authors, when we're writing our first book, we imprint a little bit of ourselves into the project because we've spent years trying to develop it. We've spent hours and hours, sleepless nights, stressful nights, trying to get the first draft finished before sending it to an editor, before sending it to beta readers, before all of that, just to get to the final version. And now with social media, I've had a lot of guests give their thoughts on this, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too later down the road, which is social media for authors is a double-edged sword. Yes, we are able to reach a wide range of people. We are able to network, make connections, and build our team. On the other side of the coin, we do find ourselves, or rather, we leave ourselves exposed to hate speech, trolls, spam, etc., what have you not. And also, as authors, our anxiety levels are heightened with social media because we don't know if people are going to love our stories, are going to be open-minded to the story we've written, or if it's going to be accepted by the community that we're writing in, whether it's sci-fi, historical fiction, fantasy, whatever. And most importantly, imposter syndrome is always going to be there, just waiting for its time to strike. So, Melinda, when you were writing the first draft of Peacekeeper, did you have those moments of imposter syndrome or heightened anxiety? And if so, or if not, what has disciplined you to continue with this story? Because this story that you've written is so good, it needs to be shared with everybody.
Yeah, so with the first draft, like when I went through it and I felt comfortable, I realized from the feedback I got from my beta, I was like, okay, this is not as good as I thought it was. So I've learned to take critical feedback and not take it personally and learn it as a learning opportunity for me to figure out, okay, what do I need to do to make this story better? Sometimes I know feedback can hurt from people. And right now it's kind of, I can't really speak too much about social media because my book hasn't been released yet. But I do have that fear currently, like, because people really are interested in my book. And then I'm like, okay, what if it comes out and it goes horribly wrong or somebody doesn't really like it? But there's always gonna be trolls on social media. So I just gotta learn to, you know, turn a blind eye to trolls or take feedback if it's critical enough or constructive feedback and learn to build upon and be okay, well, I understand that's a good point. Maybe it's something I can change in book two, or take the positive feedback and build my confidence even more.
Absolutely. So, do you plan to make this into a trilogy or a series of books set in this universe that you've created?
Yeah, that's my goal is, so at least I already have ideas for book two, and I'm hoping to even get ideas that will expand into book three.
Awesome. And kind of as a little fun question, but I definitely think it is important. So, context for this question: a previous guest of mine, who was on the show, Jasmine Young, posted on her social many weeks ago saying that we are in a golden age of independent creators for musicians, artists, writers, what have you. And I myself do agree. I was definitely in that years. And the golden years specifically, I should mention, were the quarantine years, the
Right.
COVID years. And I've been asking a lot of my guests this question, and I've been getting a lot of feedback on this. Some have argued that we're not in a golden age. Others argue that COVID just sped up a golden age that was already on the rise. And some say that, well, again, a golden age is not here, but not for the reasons we imagine. In which case, that yes, there is an influx or an increase in books, paintings, music, whatever, but there's no creative drive behind it. There's no passion behind it. So, for you, Melinda, what are your thoughts on this discussion? Do you think we are in a golden age, or are we not in a golden age at all?
I say we are probably not right at a golden age, but coming towards it. I know with COVID, there was a lot of like fear going around, and people, the vulnerability of immortality went into, I mean, mortality, excuse me, went into everybody's mind, I think.
Mm,
And then being isolated and basically having no contact with people, but relying on social media platforms to connect with people. I think it kind of, to me personally, I think it made me want, okay, I really want to put myself out there. I want to write a book. COVID was very scary for most people.
yes.
And, I could die when I'm 30 or 40 or whatever at a younger age. And I want to do this now while I'm alive versus putting it off and putting it off. So I think that it probably triggered people to put more into their passion. I know right now, like social media, sometimes people want to get on the hype train and say, well, I wrote
Yeah.
a book too. And they just want to put themselves out there. And I guess it all depends really on what they're doing. I know for me, I like writing, and I think COVID kind of helped me push me forward. But then again, it's like I think it could go both ways. Really, it could be hype or it could be the golden age.
No, that's fair. That is very fair. And again, I've had like a lot of people talk about this, and some have given some really good points. Some have argued that we are in a golden age. Some have argued that we are not in a golden age. Specifically, that yes, there's a lot more independently created stuff, but there's no passion behind it. Generally speaking, of course. And some have argued that we are slowly reaching a golden age, and just COVID and the quarantine just sped up the process. So again, there's a lot of different ways you can answer this, all of which are equally fair and valid. And I definitely feel, go back to what you said about, fear of one's own mortality, trying to, create something that, a lot of us have put off for so long, is like, I need to get this out. I really need to get that out there. I think that is important to talk about, because it really puts things into perspective, especially, if you're an author and you want to publish your first book, but you never got about to doing it. Well, COVID definitely helped sped up that mentality that, we are isolated from everybody. We can't go out. We can't talk to people. So what can we do? We just go into our own little world to escape the boredom, to escape the monotonous nature that was happening all around us in those early times. And it's just fascinating, like, how those 4 bleak, desolate years did allow independent creators to showcase their passion and their artwork, which, again, a lot of people have their thoughts on this, and you can make a whole episode about that. So, moving beyond that, let's now talk about my favorite portion of the interview, the business side of being an author, which adds a little icebreaker, Melinda. So, when you finish the final draft with your editor for Peacekeeper, how much research did you look into of how you wanted to publish your first book? Did you want to go indie? Did you want to try your hand in traditional? Did you want to go hybrid? And in your opinion, how important is it for authors to really understand that initial stage of the publishing process, doing the research to really understand which direction and path works best for you?
Yeah, so I went indie, but I did start to try to do traditional first. But I didn't make it past Aquarian, and I think it's because the sci-fi market is very limited. And I was getting frustrated because when I, did research and try to figure out, okay, which agents do sci-fi or which publishing firms do sci-fi, and I would send my query letter to them, the response was they don't do sci-fi or they do only young adult sci-fi. And my book is adult sci-fi, so I was like,
Mm,
well, I don't want to change what I've got. Um, and then sometimes I would get responses back saying that they didn't want a series. They wanted one book and that was it. Or they didn't want to have the book end on a cliffhanger, which I love. So I was like, no, I really want to have more than one book. I don't want to put everything into book one because it's going to take so much. So I decided, to have more creator control, that I decided to just go indie. And I just went out and connected with fellow authors. Some were traditional, some were indie, to try to figure out what to do. I did buy some books at bookstores about how to publish indie, and just do my own research and figure out the process. And I did reach out to a book service company that gave me step by step of what I needed to do each step of the way, and that was helpful for me tremendously.
Absolutely. And as independent authors, we do have to build our own team. We have to build our own street team, arc team, uh, editors, and cover artists, and all that stuff. And that definitely takes, a lot of screening to see, okay, does this person, match what I'm kind of working with, especially if it's like an editor who specializes in science fiction, or at least has a good idea of science fiction. Same thing for cover artists. Does their artwork match the kind of story that I'm trying to write? So can you walk us through that process, Melinda, of getting your team together to help bring about Peacekeeper?
Okay, so when I started doing my form or my brainstorming, I really wanted some characters to put pictures in my head of what the character looks like in my head as I'm writing along. So I did reach out to an artist on Twitter or X, whatever it was back then, and I reached out to her, and she was willing to go ahead and create some concept sketches of my two characters that I really wanted to focus on. And I got those in, and then I went and reached out to a person that was on Instagram that was doing book promotions, who was also doing other services such as beta reading. So I reached out to her. So I had her on board to do the first manuscript read, which really helped. And then I went to Reedsy and found an editor for somebody who did sci-fi. So I
Mm,
think doing research and trying to figure out different sites really helped. And I know a lot of people go different ways, but I was trying to make sure that I wasn't going to get scammed by somebody, and make sure
right.
that I wouldn't get my stuff stolen from somebody else.
Hmm.
So you got to be very careful about what you're doing. And I just made sure everything was legit before I start sending stuff to people.
Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head, Melinda, when it comes about, being sure of people's intentions. Because as independent authors, it is a little bit more nerve-wracking because, it's on our own. We have to do the research. We have to screen people. We have to see, okay, does this person have a good rapport with their clients? Is their artwork up, or are their testimonials up for me to view? Does this person have a website? Are they like a public person and stuff like that? It's a lot of research. And,
Hmm.
you know, I know when I was building my team, I went through a process as well. I mean, I have like some great editors, and I have like a great team of beta readers and ARC readers, which I'm very, very fortunate for. And I love their response, as well as finding a company that really knows how to make great covers that's affordable. Because again, as indie authors, it's all out of our pockets. So we have to be very money conscious
Hmm.
of who we have on our team that's within our budget. And again, sometimes that's a hit or miss. Sometimes that is a struggle in of itself. But eventually, once you do have the team that you're proud of, that you love working with, then you are going to be unstoppable. So now moving beyond that aspect, another thing about marketing, which I think is important to note, is of course understanding one's audience and the readership. So let's talk about the audience first. So from the get-go, from what you told me, Melinda, that this book and the books after in this series that you're writing are going to be marketed towards the sci-fi audience as well as the adult
Hmm.
fiction audience. But I am very curious. For this book in particular, are you looking for a specific audience in mind, like old school sci-fi, new age sci-fi, or military science fiction? Because I've often found that in each genre you have, of course, the subgenres with its own audience and their own expectations. So for you, Melinda, and again, this is another two-step or two-part question. Do you have a good idea of who your audience is leading up to the release of Peacekeeper? And in your opinion, as a writer and an author, when should the master of their work consider the audience? During the initial drafting phase or during the initial marketing slash publishing phase?
Well, I think the second part of the question, I think for me, the reader part, I think it'll be more towards for me towards the end of the marketing because I want to write for what I would like, and so I really don't think about the audience right away. But I think for marketing, yes, because you want to figure out, okay, who am I going to try to promote my book to?
Mm,
Um, do I, because I think if you think about it on the front end, um it might block some things that you want to put in your book or something like that that
right.
may dampen your creativity. So yeah, I do on the backside of it. In regards to the reading or the readers, I would probably have to say potentially all three because my character is a former Marine, so there is some military jargon in there,
Mm,
but not too much to where it doesn't it kind of throws the reader off if you don't know military stuff. But the new age, yes, because anymore there's such a push for, a more strong female leads. And so I think I would capture the new age, have strong and get more female author readers that way.
mm-hmm.
And then the old school military sci-fi, humans expansion to a different world. I think it's always going to be a part of the old sci-fi. So I kind of did all three elements for that.
Nice. That's incredible. And again, from what you've told me and how this world's set up, I definitely know a friend who's definitely going to love this because this is right in their alley. They also write military science fiction, very Tom Clancy. In fact, reading it and it was great. And I have no doubt that yours is definitely going to hit that sweet spot, that it's going to hit that niche for those that really love, military science fiction. Which will lead into another question. Before we get to that, there is a follow up to it, which is, of
Sure.
course, understanding one's readership. Now, in my opinion, I believe the readership is different from the audience because the audience is a large pool of people, whereas the readership are the individual people who are going to pick up one's book. And in my research, or research in general, there are four levels in the publishing world. You have middle grade, YA, NA, which is new adult, and AF, which is adult fiction. And each of those categories has its own set of rules and expectations when it comes to writing stories in those groups. And sometimes that's not easy, especially if you're comfortable writing in one of those categories. Like for me in particular, I like to write adult fiction. I have tried writing young adults. I have not written new adult and middle grade. I can't. I absolutely can't because it's very, very difficult for me to do. So for you, Melinda, as you've mentioned before, you are writing for a more adult audience, but I am curious. Going back to the previous question when you talked about publishing and curing from the people who responded back to you about, we're only doing YA or other kinds of storytelling. Did you consider at a point possibly maybe taking an element of Peacekeeper and making it a new story in those categories? Or did you realize I can't do that because it would diminish the story and it would be completely different from what I originally written?
Yeah, so I decided I was not going to go back and try to make it like a young adult, particularly because I wanted a very dark and gritty sci-fi book. And so, and I want to make it realistic. So, yes, and it's got mercenaries. So it's like I don't want it to be like, not as violent. or and there is language in it there too. So I felt like if I took those elements out of it, it would not be the same story that I wanted to be. So
Mm,
yeah, I kept it with adult fiction.
nice. And this leads into the next question, which is probably I think is very difficult for all authors, which is the scales, which is, balancing one's individuality with the stories of the past. And what I mean by that, Melinda, is that, as authors, we're always going to be influenced by the stories we've read growing up. And they're going to impact our writing one way or another. And this actually comes from a fellow guest I had earlier in the month, my friend Pumi, who said that each genre has an expectation of storytelling. Fantasy has its own expectations of how those stories are written or how they show the world. Science fiction, historical fiction, thrillers, murder mystery, suspense, what have you. They have their own beat for beat path of how they approach storytelling. And yes, as authors, we can subvert those storytelling aspects, but not too much to where it's completely different. And sometimes that's difficult for authors to do. That we want to make something original, but we also want to make it very familiar. That readers are going to make those internal connections, like, oh, this book reminds me of Tom Clancy, reminds me of the Rainbow Six series, or what have you. So it's a very difficult balancing act. So for you, Melinda, how have you been able to balance your individuality through Peacekeeper while also understanding, okay, I'm writing for a particular audience. They're going to have an expectation of this style of storytelling. I have to make sure it resonates with them.
Yeah, so well, my book, my reader or my books I used to read, um, I used to like Star Wars and Star Trek, and but my problem with some of those books was I only liked a certain character. So if I came into a chapter that I didn't really like the character and didn't connect with them, I was bad. I would skip the chapter, and then I felt like I wasn't reading the full book. So I didn't want that with this book. I didn't want somebody to be like, oh no, I don't like this character, or I don't really care for this particular person, so I'm just going to skip. So I want to make sure that when I wrote this book, that I would have people who liked every character I had in this book, or want to know what happened to his character and stay enthralled into it the entire way instead of just jumping back and forth. So that's what I was hoping to do with this book.
Nice. That's amazing. And I'm actually glad you brought up mentioned Star Wars. I feel a lot of the old Dark Horse Star Wars books don't get a lot of love and recognition. I absolutely love those. I actually have, you can't see them, but right next to me I have a bookshelf of like the old Del Rey Star Wars books and Dark Horse books. Probably my favorite series, which I love because it has that more military aspect, is Republic Commandos, which I absolutely loved. And I also love the follow-up book, which was Imperial Commandos. And honestly, going back to what I mentioned before, that we're always going to be influenced by the stories we've read growing up. But I definitely think what we haven't touched on is, of course, other aspects that influence our writing. And that goes beyond storytelling. That can be, our other passions, our other interests that influence our writing, which, of course, now I talk about your background in history, Melinda. And I would just like to know, how have you been able to take your passion for history and bring it into your story, Peacekeeper, as well as the world that you are creating? Because I think you mentioned early in the interview that this blends a lot. Like, yes, it's military science fiction, but has a lot of mythology and world building thrown into it.
Yeah. So first off, with history, um, a lot of sci-fi books you see where it's humanity's like how they adapt to like
Mm,
an alien, hostile alien race or a hostile planet. But in this book, I actually focus on a little bit about how does humanity's presence in space impact another race, So what you will see some toss back to, our point of our history when we first started out, how, we change everything, or how, one religion may change another religion. So you will see the impact with my alien race, the Halan, who basically have a set religion, and the humanity should not exist. So now that they do, what's going to happen? So you see a humanity's impact
Mm,
on that. And I also love mythology. I like Norse mythology. So I did create the Halan based upon different aspects of Norse mythology.
nice. That's amazing. And honestly, from what it just from there, it tells me now that, this alien race you've created has never realized that, they believe themselves to be the center of the universe, but they've never conceived the notion that there was another advanced race out there, and vice versa for the humans. There's now an advanced race that's beyond their understanding. So, what happens now when you have two advanced civilizations that now know of each other's existence? How are they going to interact with each other? Which that sounds absolutely incredible, and I cannot wait to read it when it comes out. And that, of course, leads to a very important question, probably the biggest reflective question, which I'll give some background to this, Melinda, which is I've been doing this show now for 6 to 7 years. I've interviewed a lot of authors from all stages and all walks of life, from traditionally published, independent published, hybrid publishing, to debuting authors, aspiring authors, writers who write for a passion, writers who are trying to build a career, and so forth. And what I've learned is that as authors, there are two paths: to be an author, to be known as an author. One is dedicated to storytelling, the other is dedicated to marketing. And both have their own obstacles and hurdles that the author has to overcome and eventually lead to the shared goal, which is world-renowned success, literacy acclaimed, etc. But in this industry, if you understand your goals and the realistic, you're going to be fine. Because a lot of authors that I've had on the show, and you probably agree with this too, Melinda, that if your goals are unrealistic in this industry, you're not going to do so well, because this is not an industry to get rich quick. This is an industry that you have to grow along with it, because on average, there's no guarantee your debut novel is going to be the start of your legacy. Now, of course, there are exceptions to the rule. There are many authors whose first works did launch their careers and allowed them to expand upon that and build a series. All the power to them. That's not an easy thing to do. However, again, generally speaking, there's a 50-50 chance that your book will be a critical success or a critical failure. And sometimes that's a hard pill to swallow, especially if your goals are unrealistic. So, Melinda, I now turn this over to you. With everything you've learned so far in your career as a writer and an author, how would you help a fellow author understand that, yes, there is no guarantee in this industry your book is going to be a financial success, but that shouldn't stop you from honing your craft if you're truly passionate about being a writer and understanding the realistic nature of this industry?
Yeah. So basically, when I wrote for me personally, I wrote just for me to get myself out there, not realistic that, hey, I want to make this my full time career. I
Mm,
know some people do that and they want to write for the market because they want to know what's going to sell in the market. How can I get an agent? But sometimes even when they get an agent, they die on before they even get published. The title does.
mm,
So I think for me, I would encourage people, if you want to try to make a full-time career of this, then yes, try to write for the market, but understand that it still may not work even if you get an agent. But for me, I would tell somebody, I don't expect this to be my full-time career. I have a full-time job, but I think it better off if you write just for you, because that way, for me or for anybody, I think you put more of your soul and your passion into it, and so people can see that. Because if they tell you, see, you're just writing from the market, a lot of times people just like, hey, buy my book, and it's all you hear. But I think if you see somebody actually put their soul into it, you can see, the tears they shed or the hours they put in, and the love that they give their book. And you can, I think there's a big difference when you actually look at each person about what they're doing with their book.
Absolutely, 100%. I agree with you, Melinda, that yes, for those who do want to make careers out of this, all the power to them. But definitely understand your expectations and your goals. If they're realistic, you're going to be fine. If they're unrealistic, you need to step back and reevaluate what are your intentions in this industry. Because it may be your fifth book, your 10th book, or your 20th book that really helps grow your brand and get your name out there. And that's okay, because when that happens, you can then tell your readers who have been with you, if you enjoyed this book, check out my other one to see my growth as an author. And speaking of growth, one thing that was touched upon in the beginning, but now we can talk about it fully, is networking. Networking is huge for authors. And that, I think, is probably the one positive aspect of social media, one of many positive aspects in the digital age, where we're able to connect with fellow authors, uh, get our teams from Instagram, Facebook, and other social media, editors, narrators, cover artists, what have you, and not only build our team, but also learn how have other people not adapted, but how have other people publish their book? What other research tools did they use that not only help them, but something that I can add to my arsenal? So, Melinda, are there any people you would like to give a personal shout out to who have helped you along the way with bringing Peacekeeper to live and its eventual release?
Yeah. So I will say that there was an author I connected with on Instagram earlier on. Her name is Dana Gricken. She's a traditional publisher, and she's been my mentor throughout the entire process. I mean, I asked her, and she was more than welcome to help me. Even though I didn't get to get a traditional published, but she still helped with the questions I had. She was patient, and she was she had great knowledge to share with me. And then my editor George, he was on Reedsy, but he's also on Instagram. He's a fellow author. He was tremendous. I mean, he wasn't just like, even though he's my editor, he wasn't just like, hey, fix this, this, and this. He actually gave me examples of how to fix it and helped me build myself. And actually, I learned so much during this whole process and grow as a writer that now I'll be like, oh my gosh, like I feel like if I wrote book two, it'd be the first script would be probably 10 times better than this first one was. So
Nice. That's amazing, Melinda. Absolutely incredible. And we're now reaching the final question of this amazing author's interview. Now, I know in the bio, you said that you wanted to pass on your passion for writing to your daughter, among many other things that you've learned in your journey. So, with everything you've learned thus far, what is your word of wisdom to fellow authors and writers watching and are listening to this interview right now who may be hesitant to take the first step?
yeah, so I would say just, put yourself out there. If you've got that call to write, then do it. To me, I have to write stuff down, notebook to get myself going. Just start brainstorming, listen to music. Just, put yourself out there, put your passion into it, and, write for what you love. And I think that it would help you tremendously as an individual.
Awesome. I love it, Melinda. I absolutely do. And with that, viewers and listeners, we conclude another amazing author interview here on the channel. A huge thank you to Melinda Brown making her official debut here on the channel. We wish her the very best going forward and cannot wait to see more from her with the Peacekeeper series. So, speaking of the Peacekeeper series, Melinda, when will it be released and on what platforms?
Yeah, so tentatively right now, I'm hoping for the later part of May, either the 21st, 28th. There's no set date yet. It is being formatted as we speak for ebook, paperback, and hardback. And that should be done probably by next week. And I'm going to be going through Ecom Spark. And so once I get everything uploaded, I will send links out to everybody on social media platforms. So just check out my Instagram, TikTok, X, Blue Sky. It's under Xena Writer, and you'll see links out there to purchase my books.
Awesome. I'll provide all those links down below in the description of this video. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for another amazing author interview here on the channel. A huge thank you to Melinda for coming on the show and making her official debut. And hopefully this won't be the last time we have her on the show. Hopefully we'll have her back possibly next year or very soon. Maybe she can tell us a little bit more about the world for book 2 and possibly book 3. So make sure to follow her on all those social medias, which again, I'll provide them down below. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more author interviews, as well as historians interviews and more book reviews later in the month and in the coming weeks. And as always, viewers and listeners, this is the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out. Wish you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. And until next time, have a wonderful day.